I'm a published writer, and for years I struggled to read books consistently. I would go through phases where I read a lot and then nothing for weeks, sometimes even months. It was kind of embarrassing. And yes, I tried all the usual advice, but none of it really stuck. That is, until I tried something different. I used my professional network to reach out to the pros, the true reading champions of the world, all with the clear objective to understand what they were doing differently. And what I found was surprising, because the thing that finally helped me read more felt terribly wrong at first. It's quitting books. And in this video, I'll show you why that works, I'll show you how reading chains are key to make it sustainable, and then I'm gonna share with you the system the best readers in the world use to read more, better, and more consistently. So if you enjoy this type of content and want to see more of it, make sure you're subscribed. I wasn't sure what to expect when I first reached out to the super reader community, but I've gotta say they've all been wonderfully supportive and I received a ton of helpful tips. But do you know what's the single thing every super reader has in common? They're all merciless quitters. They all have a system in place to quit early on books that fail to grab them. One comment in particular stuck with me. Life is too short for books you don't enjoy. So here's what they do. They set a hard limit that goes from a few chapters to about 50 pages, and if the magic doesn't happen by then, they move on onto another book. No guilt, no drama. And I know this will sound reasonable to some of you who might already be doing something like this, but to me, it felt wrong at first. I don't know why, but I've always struggled with the idea of quitting a book halfway through. I mean, I've done it a few times, of course, but every time it's been a struggle. Like, I'd leave the book on the nightstand gathering dust for weeks until the shame of seeing it there every night and not touching it eventually forced me to put it away. And even then, I would think, I'm just putting it away to finish it some other time. Well, guess what? I think that was the single most damaging behavior to my reading habit, and once I started switching that mentality, my reading wobbles stopped. There's a concept in psychology called cognitive load, which basically means that the more effort something requires, the more your brain resists it. And I see now that forcing myself through a book was like peak unnecessary effort. Even worse, it was preventing me from starting a new book I might actually enjoy. It was a lose-lose situation. So I learned my lesson. I don't drag through every page when a book doesn't click anymore, and I don't read just one more chapter in case it gets better either. I cut my losses and switch to another one. Do I feel guilty? Well, at first I did, yes. That's why I think having a system and applying it consistently is essential. That way, quitting a book doesn't feel personal. It doesn't mean that the book is bad. It just means that it's not right for me at this moment in time. And this came with a surprising side benefit. The pressure of choosing the right book disappeared, and just like that, reading felt much more enjoyable and lighter. But that created a new problem, because the moment I quit a book, I had to decide what to read next. And I discovered that that gap is terrible for your reading habit. Here's something I didn't expect. Quitting books was the biggest mental shift for me, but it wasn't that hard to put into practice. Changing the way I pick books to read, though, that was way harder. Because I was used to read one book at a time, so I always had plenty of time to prepare for the next one. Now, that habit was dragging me down because anytime I quit a book early, I was totally unprepared, and I noticed myself falling into the typical Netflix decision paralysis. You know, when you spend more time looking at the options and trying to decide what to choose than actually watching something, or in this case, reading it. Luckily, the helpful super reader community showed me a better way to do this. Here's what they do. Instead of picking books one by one, super readers build reading chains. And once I understood what that meant, it made complete sense. I don't know you, but my interest comes in waves. Like all of a sudden I'm super interested in a topic like gardening and I cannot get enough content about it. And then something changes and I feel like reading dystopian and I read a few novels in that genre. And then it changes again and I'm super interested in like morning routines. So Super readers use this pattern to their advantage, and whenever they get interested in something, they don't just pick one book. They line up a series of books around that same topic. 3, 4, 5 books that explore it from different angles, which, when you give yourself permission to quit early, makes total sense. Basically, instead of trying to guess which book is best, they give them all a try. And this changes everything. First, because it removes decision fatigue. The next book is always ready, so quitting feels safe. But more importantly, chain reading makes the experience of reading deeper. There's tons of research in cognitive science showing that we retain information better when we encounter related ideas repeatedly over time. And it's not just theory. When I started reading like this, I could feel it. Instead of reading something once and forgetting it, ideas started connecting. I saw patterns I wouldn't have seen before, and now when I think back on something I've read, I don't just vaguely remember it, I understand it. So just with these 2 tips, I was already reading more and better, but there was another essential change I needed to make in order to make my reading consistent. Luckily, the super reader community had a solution for that too. As I started reading only those books I fully enjoyed, I realized something unexpected. Enjoying a book is not enough incentive to read it every day. Some days, I just wasn't in the mood. At first, I thought that meant that my brain needed a break from reading every now and then. But another tip from the super reader community helped me see that reading itself wasn't the problem, it was sticking with one book at a time. As it turns out, I had been undercutting my reading potential my entire life. You see, all my life until that point, I had been a linear reader. I would start a book and continue that book until I finish it or slowly gave it up. The only exception to that pattern had been with nonfiction books that I used for reference or with the occasional audiobook. I don't know, it just felt right, and the mere thought of reading multiple stories at the same time seemed wrong and confusing. Wouldn't I start mixing stories? Honestly, I thought everyone did the same. It was only a few years back that I saw someone breaking this pattern for the first time. It was my own son. He was around 8 years old when I first saw him reading on the sofa with 5 other books scattered around him. So I did what any annoying parent does and asked him to tidy up those books that he had finished already reading. His answer shook me. "I haven't finished any of these," he said. "I'm reading them all." I was confused, like, what? He's reading all those books at the same time? Should I be worried? Or does this mean he's a genius? Turns out I was the odd one. My son, like many other people, perhaps even yourself, is a parallel reader. And as it turns out, parallel reading is essential to read consistently, because just as we go through interest phases, we also go through moods. So trying to force a book on the wrong mood, it simply doesn't work. So I gave it a try, and yeah, that fixed the consistency issue. But what about my fear of that creating confusion or making me lose track of the story? Well, it turns out that wasn't a real issue, which now, in hindsight, I should have known because I don't watch one TV show from start to finish before starting another or listen to one podcast exclusively. I consume tons of content at the same time and somehow I never lose track. So why was I treating books differently? I don't know. I guess I was being dumb. So what I do now is have multiple reading chains at my disposal at any given time. So instead of forcing a book into one mood, I have options. I have a reading chain on cooperativism that I'm reading when I feel inspired and full of energy. Another reading chain with epic fantasy, where I'm now reading the Reckoner series by Brandon Sanderson whenever I feel in the mood for good fiction. Then another one with a Japanese light novel series for those days I crave lighter and sillier entertainment, etc., etc., etc. And this isn't just good for consistency. There's actually research suggesting that interleaving or switching between different types of content can improve learning and engagement. It keeps the brain active, it reduces boredom, and it makes it easier to keep going. Best of all, it changes the mindset from "I have to read this book" to "what do I feel like reading now?" And that small change makes all the difference. Now, all of these tips so far were very meaningful for me, but I realized that some of you might have already been parallel reading or book quitting the entire time. But I think most of you will be as shocked as I was when I heard about the next trick that the best readers in the world use to read more than anyone else. And it's a habit that not only has drastically improved my reading experience, particularly when I'm reading nonfiction, but it has even changed the way I write. Super readers see books in a different way than the rest of the world. I used to see a book as a progression with an intro, a middle, and an end. I saw it as a crafted experience where my only job as a reader was to follow the instructions. The only exception to that would be the choose your own adventure books I read growing up. Well, super readers see any book as a potential choose your own adventure experience. They're not constrained by a book's structure, they see it as a suggestion and they actively question it. Even when reading books they enjoy, they skip, they go forward, then back, then jump again. They customize every reading experience to make it the most enjoyable reading experience for them. Because they understand that reading is not about respecting the structure, it's about extracting value. And as a writer myself, that felt humbling. I had assumed I had a power to dictate how my work was supposed to be consumed. But when I learned that there were people reading like this, I realized that I didn't care about that power at all. I know it sounds cliche, but it's so true. The most rewarding part of being a writer is having readers who enjoy my work. And if that requires them to move things around or to skip whole sections, then so be it. So I started doing that with my own reading, and for nonfiction, it's been massive. I don't make decisions on whether a book deserves to continue to be read based on the first chapters anymore. No, I look at the index and choose something that piques my interest and read that first. And then, if it's good, I go back. Or sometimes I jump to another interesting chapter. The most important thing is that it's helping me take better decisions and I enjoy reading more. And I'm gonna say something controversial now, but I've started doing it with fiction too. Not every time, but with books with multiple points of view or when suddenly a book in a series takes a long detour around side characters that I don't really care about. And it's been liberating. All my life, I just gritted my teeth and read on, silently cursing the writer, or I stopped reading altogether. But now, I just keep those chapters until the time I feel like reading them. So you could say I claimed back my power as a reader. And before you start judging me for doing this, I urge you to read one of the later books in the Song of Ice and Fire series if you haven't already. You'll get it then, because there's no way you read that and you don't want to skip some chapters at some point. And by the way, if George R.R. Martin did the same too, we would have a finished series by now. Now, did I receive more than those 4 tips? Yes, I did. But many of those you've probably already heard about in other videos, like controlling the environment, removing distractions, setting up your reading space, yada yada yada. Are these useful? Yes, but in an incremental way. On their own, I don't think they're nearly as useful as the 4 tips I shared with you in this video. So, if I had to summarize everything, what sets super readers apart is that they remove friction at every step of the way and they ensure that every reading experience is as enjoyable as it can possibly be. That's what keeps them hooked day after day. So if you want to do the same, quit books that don't work for you, build reading chains so you never lose momentum, read multiple books at the same time so your reading always matches your mood, and do whatever it takes to make the reading experience enjoyable. It's worked for me, so let me know in the comments below how it works for you. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.